All right, okay. All right, welcome back to the last keynote speaking session of the fourth day of PGVIS, and we are sorry for some technical difficulties. But now, let's enjoy Mozart Now, the Magic Flute at Angkor by Dr. Hennamann, who is the Dean International of the College of the Arts, Humanities and Social Science at Cardiff University, co-director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research into Opera and Drama, and a reader in music, and she's way much more musicologist and our dear friends. So if we are ready, please welcome Dr. Monika Hennamann. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the technological hiccups. I hope you enjoyed your extra coffee break, so 15 minutes. I'm afraid we'll probably go over because of that, and it's complicated because I've asked the conductor of the project to join us on Zoom from Australia, and I've got two students here, would like to interview him. That's why it's also complicated, but I thought I'd be risky and I'd dare to fail. Here we go. First things first, in the program booklet you will see the title, The Magic Flute at Angkor. It should be Angkor, that's been corrected. What has not been corrected, because it only happened this morning, the title of this presentation should be Mozart Soon rather than Mozart Now, because I had an email this morning that the performance that I'm going to discuss with you today has been postponed indefinitely. Just arrived this morning, so we'll have other new questions occurring. But let's get through this first, and then hopefully everything else will fall into place smoothly. So, Mozart's famous late 18th century opera Die Zauberflöte, the Magic Flute, as perhaps befits an allegory, has long been subject to adaptations, animations, translations, and transformations. In 2018, it reached a notable milestone in supposedly becoming the first Western opera ever to be staged, or at least semi-staged, in Cambodia, in the capital Phnom Penh, to be exact. Far from being a uniquely eclectic experiment, the production was intended merely as a prelude to a fully staged performance scheduled to take place amid the magnificent temples of the Angkor Archaeological Park. This is working, yes. Originally in November 2020, but postponed for a year and then for another, owing to COVID, as you can see, and you can see the 2020 flyer here. It will now, at least that's what I thought until this morning, when news reached me that the project had been postponed yet again. We live in a volatile world, indeed, uncontrollable, as we heard yesterday. Finally takes place in December 2020 at Chao Sai Thevoda Temple. And that's the team filming The Queen of the Night just this June. However, this will be hardly Mozart's Singspiel as might have been recognized by the Viennese in 1791, but rather, as acknowledged in the title, a Cambodian magic flute, incorporating traditional instruments, music and dance associated with the native 16th and 17th century Reamker epic. The Cambodian version of the Indian Ramayana centers around a prince forced to master several challenges and fight supernatural forces in the forest for 14 years before triumphantly returning home to claim his throne. Mozart's score will be sung in the original German, with the dialogue replaced by a narration in Khmer. A multicultural confusion, therefore, but with a plot centering around shared values of trust, loyalty, love, and revenge. Among the questions that arise, of course, are: how does one introduce Western opera to a country that has had little prior exposure to it? Indeed, why should one do so at all? Vietnam has 3 opera houses built during the French colonial rule, but Cambodia, like its neighbor Laos, has, for better or worse, remained largely innocent of opera. And why Die Zauberflöte, and for what audience? Is this mainly for Western tourists in Siem Reap, for locals, or for both? Why the adaptation of the musical score? Basically, what's the point? And then there's the bigger picture. How does this project relate to other East meets West intercultural endeavors? Theorists have developed the concept of intercultural theater in the 1990s, which is briefly the integration of 2 or more cultures in a theatrical production. and they are sometimes categorized as adaptive, imitative, or universal. But are these concepts at all useful here? And if so, which of the categories can be usefully applied? So I'm just going to leave this up in case you're interested to read up a bit about this. This presentation analyzes the theory and practice of this radical reworking of the Viennese classic. It attempts to evaluate it not as a curiosity of reception history, but as an emblem of post-colonialism, of nationalism, of patronage, of marketing, and of tourism. Now, a confession. When I first started researching into this project, I had intended to analyze and evaluate the then planned November 2020 magic flute premiered in the temple of Angkor. But then, as we all know too well, COVID struck, forcing the event to be postponed by at least a year. Consequently, this presentation, that's even more true so as of this morning's news, which I had expected to be about the production of the magic flute, has turned out to be a projected production, which inevitably leads to more questions than answers. But it is not entirely Hamlet without the prince. There have been at least one private and one public semi-stage performance of the magic flute in Cambodia, and a large amount of publicity from which some conclusions might be drawn. And I have been lucky enough to have found out more and more about the evolving project directly from director Stefano Vicioli and conductor Aaron Carpane. And I'm delighted that Aaron will join us, I hope, for the second half of this session. And he will be interviewed by two of the current PGM students, Edward and Minnie, who are sitting here. There has also been, and this was not mentioned in the project's publicity material, a prior Cambodian magic flute, admittedly of a very different sort, to which I will come back in a moment. And before I say anything else, I should also admit, in the spirit of full disclosure, that unfortunately I do not speak a word of Khmer, the only official language in the Kingdom of Cambodia. I therefore have to rely entirely on English-speaking sources, which may well present a very different picture than sources in the country's native language. However, I do have at the very least, a little direct familiarity with the country, unlike the handful of British experts on Russian music of a previous generation who notoriously had never set foot in Russia at all. But let's move to a short project timeline. It's all okay. The Cambodian magic flute was envisioned shortly after musical trained journalist Robert Turnbull arrived in Cambodia in 1997. He eventually invited Italian opera stage director Stefano Vicioli and conductor Aaron Carpane to lead the project. They had been part of an experienced team that had brought Dido and Aeneas to Bhutan, Acis and Galatea to Macau, and Orfeo to Japan. Workshops started in 2014, with auditions to follow in 2015. In April 2017, an intimate preliminary performance of the magic flute took place in a garden setting at Navatu Dreams Resort in Siem Reap, followed by a promotional performance in Phnom Penh's Chaktomuk Theatre in January 2018. And here's a snapshot of the performance venue and the audience members. It all looks very Western to me, and mostly for a Western audience. All this happened in the hope that a full performance of the opera would take place at an Angkor temple in 2019. But tragedy intervened. Robert Turnbull, 61, the instigator of the project, died unexpectedly in late 2018. The troupe, however, rallied on, arranging an audience with King Norodom Sihamoni in July 2019. The king offered his support and even pledged to preside over the Angkor premiere. Why? Well, possibly because he himself used to work as a classical dance instructor, in addition to serving as a UNESCO ambassador and later cultural ambassador in Europe, so he has strong personal interest in supporting the country's artistic life. After several administrative holdups, the performance was finally confirmed for November 2020. It was then rescheduled for December 2021 and postponed again to December 22, including a gala performance with the king. However, the many issues that remained to be resolved apparently turned out to be overwhelming, necessitating yet another postponement. In this context, a brief reminder of Cambodia's troubled history and current political system might be useful. Over the last 1.5 centuries, Cambodia has variously been a so-called French protectorate, part of Indochina, and under Japanese occupation during World War II. It finally became independent in 1953. It was roped against its will into the Vietnam War about a decade later, and then fell under the cruel regime of the Khmer Rouge, with the genocide killing most of the country's intellectuals and artists. After the official end of the Vietnam War and a brief interlude of being governed by a United Nations mission, the Cambodian People's Party under Prime Minister Hun Sen assumed power through a coup d'etat in 1997. Despite many problems, it currently has one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. As you may well know better than I do, Cambodian traditional music reaches at least as far back as the Hindu-Buddhist Khmer Empire from the 9th to the 15th century. Royal dances have remained icons of Cambodian culture. However, their popular music often contains a mixture of traditional and Western instruments. One particularly popular traditional form is the aya, a form of lyrical poetry often performed as a duet between a man and a woman, one answering the other's verse. So the following teaser from the forthcoming production, sorry, I should take this off, I've got this, may well be more, oh, I'm sorry, let's do this again. What have I done? May sound not particularly alien to Cambodian ears. And please do pardon the mindless background music. Okay.
No, wait. Okay. Okay. 1, 2.
Chased deep devotion, and from this duty never part. The joys of love shall be our own. We live by love alone. We live by love alone.
But we haven't answered the question, why the choice of work? In the words of the producer, this is the reason. No, sorry. Let's go here.
Several reasons why we're doing the magic flute. One is it's a very wonderful and tuneful opera, very accessible and with beautiful melodies. But another reason is that the storyline is very, very similar to the story of the Reamker, which is the Ramayana story, of course. The central relationship between Rama and Sita and the rescue of Sita by Rama and Hanuman is actually not that different to the story of the magic flute, where Tamino falls in love with Pamina and goes off in search of her at the temple of Zarastra. So there are actual many similarities, and we think that many Cambodians will be able to relate to the story and that they'll actually find it very meaningful.
And how about the question of the purpose of the project?
Several reasons why.
The project is claiming to do no less than promoting the country's cultural rebirth. This is justified by a number of contributing components, including, for example, the combination of the traditional epic, the Reamker, with Shikaneta's story, the inclusion of traditional dance elements, the reconceptualization of the sections of the score for local instrumental forces, and also the making of the work accessible by adding an explanatory narration in Khmer to the German libretto. But let's listen to some of the participants.
មានចំណុចពិសេសណាស់ហើយក៏ចាក់ចុងក្រអៅបេះដូងរបស់យើងដែរដោយសារវាមានអរិយធម៌វប្បធម៌ស្រៀងទៅជាមួយនឹងរឿងរៀបការខ្មែរយើងដែរ
ហើយខាងតន្ត្រីក៏ដូចគ្នាគឺយើងយកទម្រង់នៃភ្លេងបុរាណខ្មែរយកមកបញ្ចូលជាមួយនឹងភ្លេងបច្ឆិមប្រទេសអញ្ចឹងវាមានលក្ខណៈពិសេសមួយនៅក្នុងអូប៉េរ៉ានឹងតែម្ដង
Other aims include the reconstruction and revival of an ancient instrument that had become extinct. This is the pin, an ornate harp based on a 7th century sculpture found at a prehistoric site, thus creating, in a modest fashion, the original sound of Angkor. More practically, the project provides training and performance opportunities for local, which in this current context means ASEAN, musicians and dancers. All of these, of course, laudable and worthy goals. They translate conceptually into a type of intercultural theater, mixing imitative and adaptive approaches. How did the audience react to the pre-performance? Let's see.
ខ្ញុំគឺពិតជាអស្ចារ្យមែនទែនសម្រាប់ការសម្ដែងនេះតើតើជាមួយនឹងការយកអ្វីដែលជារបស់ខ្មែរបុរាណខ្មែរហ្នឹងជាមួយនឹងអូប៉េរ៉ាបុរាណរបស់បរទេសចូលគ្នាកើតជាកម្មវិធីសម្ដែងមួយដ៏អស្ចារ្យ
Nous, on s'attendait absolument pas à ça, quoi. Vraiment pas. On s'attendait à un spectacle beaucoup plus classique, avec quelques inspirations cambodgiennes, mais pas une vraie fusion aussi riche.
ខ្ញុំសប្បាយចិត្តពីព្រោះអី spectacle ហ្នឹងជាអ្វីដែលជាភាពប្លែកថ្មីមួយទៀតខ្ញុំចាប់អារម្មណ៍ថាភ្លេងអូប៉េរ៉ានិងភ្លេងខ្មែរធ្វើឲ្យកម្មវិធីហ្នឹងកាន់តែអស្ចារ្យមែនទែន
Des costumes qui étaient absolument magnifiques, donc du coup c'était extraordinaire à voir et je me suis pas ennuyée une seule seconde.
And once the initial tasters events had been successful, politicians also started to embrace this opportunity to foster international cultural relations. The premiere was supposed to mark the 25th anniversary of the Angkor Wat Archaeological Park and the closing of the 13th Asia-Europe Meeting Summit, a political dialogue forum attended by more than 50 heads of state and government. Similar links were created for the rescheduled premieres. And here I'm showing you two politicians' quotes. Music can and often takes on political or at least ambassadorial functions, as you can see here. So the Minister of Culture and Fine Arts said, we believe that this performance will be a positive manifestation of cross-cultural exchange and will further assist in the promotion of Cambodian cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible. And here we have the General Director of the Apsara National Authority, who's also endorsing this, a Cambodian magic flute to be performed in Angkor. The performance surely will build and promote strong cultural ties using an innovative creative approach to musical theater that fosters cultural, social, and diplomatic relations between participating nations. As mentioned before, this endeavor surprisingly was not quite the first Cambodian magic flute. An earlier work with this title had been commissioned by American theater director Peter Sellers for a 2006 festival in Vienna, a 90-minute production inspired by the magic flute titled Pamina Devi. And we'll hear Peter Sellers talking about this for a moment.
The Cambodian magic flute is a very special experience. Pol Pot destroyed a 1,000-year-old dance and opera tradition. A new generation had to rebuild it literally from the ashes. The tradition was built back very slowly, very carefully. And suddenly, from this new generation of dancers, one of them, Sopiline Shapiro, came to America, lived in the Cambodian exile community in Long Beach, looked at a larger world and went back to Cambodia to rebuild the tradition, but with the West and a global viewpoint as part of Cambodian culture. The result is a magic flute, where the images from Mozart's magic flute are transformed. And they're transformed very much with a feminist agenda.
Let's leave it at that. As will be obvious, this was an undertaking of a very different nature, an adaptation or even recreation. A Cambodian dance drama danced only by Cambodian women, narrated through lyrics sung in Khmer and accompanied by traditional Khmer percussion instruments, with a story resembling chicaneras but transposed to Southeast Asia. Entrusted with the realization had been Sophie Lyon Shapiro. And here's an announcement of the performance. An award-winning Cambodian dancer and choreographer, a winner of the 2009 NEA National Heritage Fellowship, with a mission of empowering Cambodian refugees in the West and of recreating national traditions that had been driven almost to extinction by the Khmer Rouge. The performance reached Phnom Penh in Cambodia much later, in May 2015. Here's a glimpse of the rehearsals. More generally, there have been a surprisingly high number of other attempts to adapt the magic flute into a foreign cultural context. The story and music seem extremely robust to survive cartoon treatments like this, for example.
You have passed your first test with flying colors.
Then we...
But the test must continue. Walk this way.
So this is...
You have passed your first test with flying colors.
So this is a South Korean cartoonized version. Another more substantive one is a production at the second Shanghai Comic Opera Festival in 2014, where it was performed as one of the 6 world classic operas in German with Chinese subtitles. Here, it underwent a localization procedure in order to relay 18th century operatic humor to contemporary Chinese and Western audiences. Or, as Li Wai, the director of the Shanghai Comic Opera Show, put it, "We want the comic operas to be down to earth, to reflect the life of ordinary people, so that it can be understood by the Chinese audience." And of course, the context is very different here. In today's China, the consumption of Western culture, in addition to international travel, is partly a status symbol for an increasingly prosperous middle class. And Mozart is regarded as a cultural icon in China. Everybody will know that this is a depiction of Mozart. The magic flute was also adapted into an African musical in 2007. Its approach resembles that of the latter Cambodian magic flute. Here, the score is arranged for an orchestra of marimbas, drums, and township percussion. Set in contemporary South Africa, the music reinterprets the story from a local perspective, telling of Prince Taminu's quest to rescue Pamina, both of whom are Xhosa-speaking teenagers, daughter of the Queen of the Night, from the Priest of the Sun. Unlike the Cambodian project with its very specific and iconic performance venue, the musical was then launched on a UK tour. And here's an excerpt of that. right. Before we turn to, hopefully, our interview with the conductor, I would like to ask what we can currently conclude in advance, as it were, from this fascinating intercultural experiment. One aspect must naturally be that evaluation remains a matter of taste. In other words, whether we like it or we don't, you have to decide for yourself. Another important question might be why localization was regarded as necessary if the music and story of the original are as clearly structured, as easily relatable across generations and cultures, and universally appealing as claimed. Could the assumption that Cambodian audiences need an adaptation to their home culture to appreciate Mozart's Singspiel possibly be regarded in some quarters as somewhat patronizing, especially with the majority of the production team and performing resources coming from abroad? And you can see that was for 2018. On the other hand, I also have a list here to give you an idea of the number of Cambodian performers initially involved in the production. So there's a fair number, a majority of them were dancers, obviously. On the other hand, one might also argue that the Cambodian magic flute production is as intentionally heterogeneous as its intended audience, which will presumably be a mixture of Cambodians and Western tourists that one would expect to find in Siem Reap. Audience understanding, as the production will feature a mixture of Khmer and German, will be facilitated through the language of music. And the production is not quite as unusual as some of the press coverage would have us believe, although it's certainly noteworthy. And ironically, the introduction of Cambodian musical elements is arguably not dissimilar in principle to the Viennese Turkish exoticism that Mozart himself was familiar with. Perhaps not a rondo a la Turca, but certainly a Singspiel a la Khmer. Thank you for that. That brings us to the end of the production. The presentation, and hopefully to an interview with the conductor. My main question, actually, I don't know what your questions are, is the reciprocity of cultural exchange. How do we make sure that we leave post-colonial attitudes behind us for good and encourage a new level of intercultural enrichment in our volatile global age? How is it going to be a backing and forthing? How are we going to benefit from the inclusion of these Cambodian elements? But I would like to stop this now, and hopefully, I don't know whether Aaron is with us online.
He's not. We've checked all of the Zoom links that we sent.
Okay, has he replied to anything?
I've tried to call him as well.
Thank you. Let me see what's in my inbox. Thank you very. Let's see whether he's replied to me, and you don't want to see the current applications, and you don't want to see my inbox, but that's what we can see. No.
But while we are waiting, I mean, if you have any thoughts or any questions.
Well, I really want to hand over to Ed and Minnie to see what their questions are, and then take things from there, really. We've prepared this.
I see.
So, not sure.
Sure? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Wonderful. So obviously we'd prepared questions for the conductor, but obviously as he's not here now, we'll just kind of run through what our kind of questions were for the whole experience, as I think we both found it quite intriguing as a topic as well, thinking about bringing the Western opera to Khmer and wondering if the Southeast Asia actually needs it or some things along that line. But one of the things that I was quite interested in was how has it progressed from 2016, was it?
Yeah.
2016 all the way to 2022, and then being postponed again and again, and just the ideas behind that, and what the future plans are with that as well.
Yeah, because we were discussing that surely the pandemic must have affected the production somehow, that maybe there must be changes in a way that made the production turn out differently, but yeah.
Yeah, what I can tell you,
unanswered.
What I can tell you about this is that some of the initial pre-performances were sung in English, so that's certainly been changed. I know that the constitution of the orchestra has been changed throughout the project. At first was, mostly working with Cambodians and supplementing performance from Young Siu To, among other things. And then the latest idea was to include orchestra members of the national orchestras of the ASEAN countries, because the production team knew and saw that a lot of these national orchestras were in real trouble through COVID. I don't know whether any of these have been dissolved. I might be the case. I'm not sure what the current state is. So give local, regional musicians an opportunity to perform professionally, be involved in this production. Also do community engagement projects. If the performance had happened in December, we're in the process of setting up student volunteers, both from the area and also from, in my case, Britain, to help with the production, to really promote cultural exchange across the generations and across cultures, across various countries. The team had secured sponsorship for singers. One of the lead singers was to come from the Czech Republic, because the king was based formerly in Prague. Austrian country had secured sponsorship for another singer, so it was going to be a broad project with funding coming from different parts of the world. So I know that. The other questions, I was hoping Aaron would be here and tell us about his future plans. There is a Friends of Angkor Wat team also that drums up funding, and they sponsor all sorts of activities. They founded a new company to produce this performance in December. I don't know what the future of this is, but this just shows us how difficult it is to get operas performed, how much things have to fall into place to make this performance happening. The two of you, I know you have more questions, which, and others can also chime in if they want.
One of the other things which I think our audience may be able to chime in on as well is the intent of the performance as well. Obviously, you mentioned the political relations as well, but we're wondering whether education, entertainment, and who the target audience really is for it, whether people think it's for the Cambodian people or just for foreign tourists, and whether that's a good or a bad thing as well. So bringing tourism to the area, which may not be as wealthy as possible, or whether it is just a kind of gimmick, so giving the opera audience something that
I know
they maybe want.
Opera buffs like novelty in their unusual performances. I know a lot of opera fans who are willing to spend a lot of money to travel to exotic places, especially the Wagnerians. I mean, there's whole hordes of people who travel from one production of The Ring to the next, from Hawaii to, Sydney. Not sure whether that's the case with Mozart so much, but I can see on social media a lot of people from a lot of countries interested in just coming there for the special experience. I'm not sure how many local audiences would be interested. And I'm also not sure how well known Mozart is in this day and age where everybody can go on the internet, listen to Mozart, the magic flute, other classical music. It's quite easily at a lot of people's fingertips these days. Do we need opera performances in opera houses or other venues to bring these works to the region? What is the benefit? I'm not sure, and I guess I would like to hear your general reactions to such an undertaking. Does Cambodia need Mozart? That's the question I have. What is Mozart going to do to Cambodians? I think the best, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question as well. And
why not just make a very nice piece together with the Cambodians?
Yeah. Well, it would attract less sponsorship.
But that gives me then the feeling that Mozart is kind of used maybe to get recognition or approval, and do we need that? I'm not sure.
Well, I personally think the music is beautiful
Of course.
and worthy of performing and worthy to introducing to new audiences, because it's my mission to keep historical music alive in some way, and a lot of people love this music, so we can complement it by new creations. But I personally think I would want to hear Mozart in addition to contemporary composers as well, and I can see, music curricula, that's getting back to your talk yesterday, and the process of being changed. Classical music is taking more and more of a back seat, and what is going to happen to that in a generation or two? Are we still going to listen to any of it?
Yeah, well, it's of course even a much larger discussion about what we actually culturally represent. If we keep representing ourselves from the 18th century, like what is our cultural identity now? What is the cultural identity of the Cambodians now? If we want to really connect, maybe we should connect on our contemporary level rather than, well, these are all questions sort of that it calls up, and obviously I don't want any answers, and I also don't have answers. So.
I don't either, but I find it fascinating. I find the enthusiasm fascinating. And this has been going on now for coming up to 8 years, and there's still momentum, and people still want to make it happen. So there's enough interest there to keep trying. Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see your point.
This is very troubling. But, one could easily dismiss it as inherently colonial, no matter if the benefits are there. You're raising funds for this, you're educating the masses, and the government likes it. But that's basically how societies are colonized over and over again. But then again, it's not the first time that they're doing anything like this in this very sacred space. By the way, Angkor is just the backdrop to Mozart. That's all it does in this case. But they've done rock concerts there. There's this Japanese One Asia band that does world music stuff, right? But they've done it there. So I don't know how different that is from this. So, but indeed, it's troubling.
I can see why you think that, but how does one get past this colonialism? It'd be great if we could continue to engage without these labels immediately coming to mind. So that's the question I have. How can we exchange our cultural products productively without this label of colonialism immediately being, pulled up, summoned to put a label on it?
Yeah, it's what exchange is going on there except the monument and a few dancers, because they can dance. They like extras, but not musicians, because they don't play the right music.
So one way of creating an exchange, and that there has been interest by Netflix and a very accomplished film producer to make a documentary about this, and then make it available to a much broader worldwide audience that then can be introduced to this form of dance and culture, these instruments. So a new take on Mozart. So all of a sudden there is a possible exchange there past beyond the immediate performance in Angkor, which would be over in 5 days anyway. Don't know whether it's good enough, whether it's a start, whether that's also troubling.
The traditional instruments are not there, right?
Yeah.
Did it come out? I know in Tony Shapiro's.
Yep. No, they will have traditional instruments in combination with Western instruments. Yeah. So they've introduced that, recreated this harp that was extinct, for example, and incorporated that. They'll incorporate dance elements, so with Cambodian music. So it's a fusion. The Mozart will be cut as well. So it's 2 hours of music, Mozart and Cambodian elements combined. Is that a start? Is that going in the right direction?
Yeah, another question, another important one that maybe we should bring it up and be open for discussion is following what Dr. Monika has showed us, that these kind of projects happen before, where the Western culture has been brought to Southeast Asia to, for a showcase, for a concert. So my question is, does Southeast Asia need Western opera? Or why do we need Western music culture?
That is a good question, but it also happens in the other direction. Chinese operas companies have started touring the West. Does the West need Chinese operas? I think yes, it's a cultural enrichment. You learn about other countries, about other cultures, about other customs, and there are beautiful artworks that are worth sharing beyond the borders of a country, I think. What do you think?
I think the point that would be positive. It's just for the sake of expanding cultural knowledge.
What do the others think? Does the East need Western opera? Does the West need Eastern culture exposure to?
Well, first, thank you very much for comprehensive presentation. There are two issues for me. The first one is the level of commodification on every side. You mentioned that Mozart has become just an icon. Mm-hmm. And then the other way around is true. There are certain picture postcards, images of Cambodian dancers and musicians. Mm-hmm. And that may be what's being propagated here. And because I don't think by hearing this particular production once or twice will necessarily increase your understanding of Cambodian dance or music. It just, you've seen it once. So that's one side, this level of commodification, well, to put it quite brutally, in order to make a successful entertainment and to make money. And it seems to do it very well. And okay, they do it well. They are very professional, and then they've dedicated themselves to make it happen. And I'm no, even if I had the power, I'm not in a position to prevent it. A project like this can happen, and there are good things, as you pointed out. And let's hope good things will happen. So that's the first point. The second point is that it's been taking a long time, and then it's been kept being postponed. Meanwhile, for example, Black Lives Matter happened. Our perception of colonization, but also demography sensitivity have definitely changed in the last 8 years. Collectively, how comfortable are we now with a project of this type? Because 80 years ago, we might have been more positive about the potential benefits in terms of education, cultural exchange, and so on. But now, with a dead white composer from 250 years ago, and the nature of the way in which the so-called East, this packaged East and the packaged West meet in order to make money. In the world where there is a big war happening, which is affecting our everyday life in terms of petrol price and so forth, how comfortable are we? Again, I don't think any one of us is trying to prevent this project happen. It's gone so far. Let's hope it will happen, and we keep our fingers crossed. But at the same time, it gives us food for thought that this timeliness, because it's okay, if it becomes a video production, that's one thing. But whenever there is a live performance, which music and theater tend to be, rather than film industry or visual art, this timeliness seems to be such an important thing. So in my question to you would be, as you have watched and observed this project develop over a period of time, how has your own perception of the project changed?
Well, I've had a critical sort of mind about it all along, and I see the problems, but I tend to sort of focus on the possible positive outcomes, and I also think doing a project like that is better than the alternative, stopping to promote culture altogether. So I haven't come up with an alternative that would address all the issues that we have in a better fashion. What can we do better? How does the world become a better place by not doing something like that? So I think the positives for me outweigh the challenges and also the problems, the real problems that are there. So, and I find it fascinating, and I'm keen to learn, and I would probably take that opportunity to get more familiar with Cambodian music, dance, and then follow up on that. It's an introduction. It's a starting point that I would not have otherwise. That's my personal reaction. I know I've talked to a variety of people. I know some are enthusiastic, some are extremely critical, and this seems to provoke quite strong reactions, which again is a possibility of opening a dialogue and starting or continuing the conversation. I think that's another positive thing. We can start talking about, what this does, what the dangers are, what the problems are, and how to overcome them. So that's my personal view. So I'm impressed by the enthusiasm of the team that wants to make this happen.
Yeah, but of course, Cambodia is there. I'm curious now for our students here, what if we produce Mozart in Wat Arun? What do you think?
Well, do you students want to say anything?
Any more questions?
Your own perspective about it.
Or just how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I just like it makes me like kind of wonder like what is this? Who is this for? Yeah. Really?
Who is the
is
audience?
Because it's for because like who do you think is gonna come to watch this?
I would go. Who else would go? Raise your hands.
Yeah, of course we would go. But then,
raise your hands. Those of you who would be interested in going, raise your hands.
Yeah,
I
but that's the point, isn't it? It's like.
Okay, and just no, nobody. I don't know. Then you can be neutral. Anybody else? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in Vadarun, who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? Okay.
Yeah, then wouldn't you want like people who lives like out that window to go? Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Yes.
Let me interrupt quickly.
Yeah.
Really short. Do you know how much they were selling tickets for or anything?
Tickets for the Western audience were between 100 and 700 American dollars. I assume they would have sold, because it's fundraising. They need the ticket sales to fund the production. Last time I talked, they needed to raise $800,000 to pay for it all. That's a lot of money. I suspect they would have sold tickets for a local audience for much less or even given them away for free, but I don't know that as a fact. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, but this actually brings us to probably the core of the issue. This is ultimately a commercial enterprise, as most opera productions are in this day and age. I mean, we shouldn't
imagine ourselves being very holy or culturally clean about this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how opera houses are run, taking away probably the 86 ones in Germany and a few others in other parts of Europe that have massive state subsidies for now. The rest of the world, opera houses are run as enterprises. So $100 to $700 is a completely normal ticket price, even in London.
Yeah.
So this is not unusual, and I think there would be an audience, and obviously it wouldn't be the audience down here, but they wouldn't attend any opera because it's simply not their culture, you know. So I'm liking this project more and more.
Good.
Because it sort of seems quite natural. The problem is looking at it through a colonial lens instead of looking at through a globalization lens, because this is simply the result of globalization. The same way as popular culture, even rock, even jazz, is all over the place. What I have discovered since coming to Asia is that classical music is also here, all over the place. And it's not because of the colonial heritage, it's probably also because of that, but it's through the channels that classical music is distributed today. They are global. Yep. The same way as we consume K-pop and Mandopop in Europe. So J-pop for that sake. So this is really, I think it's in a way a healthy sign of the healthy signs in this is that they are making an attempt at integrating it locally. There's some localization. If that is badly done, it will be a bad show. If it's well done, well, I mean, we were discussing Pink Floyd playing at Pompeii Theatre. It's not very different. So I actually find this. I would be curious. I would be joining you just to see how it was. What really provokes me is every time we see this in opera houses all over the world, is setting up magic flute with 1700 costumes and making it look like old stuff. That doesn't work. This is quite normal. It would be very interesting to see if they would do Wagner there. I don't think they would, simply because that Wagner is not part of popular culture. Mm-hmm. Magic flute is part of popular culture, is part of a world heritage, because it's been on film and it's been Hollywood. It's mass culture.
Yep, people can relate to the story.
They can relate to it, yeah. And there is a timelessness also, yeah.
Yes, the catchy tunes.
Yeah.
Yep, as opposed to Wagner. The catchiness is of a different nature.
Feels very catchy.
I know, on a different level, I know.
No, I'm just taking back the mic.
Okay. Right, taking over control. Yeah, I know. So I'd be very keen to hear from the rest of you after the official part is over and after we're being recorded. I just want to hear what students think. Do you need opera in your world? Would you? I've talked to Minnie yesterday who sings opera and who hasn't had many chances to experience live opera performances in an opera house. So it's different than watching it on a DVD, actually. It's a very, you have to feel it, you have to smell it. Going down to Bayreuth, one of the most stunning, hearing Wagner and Bayreuth, one of the most stunning experiences was the sense of smell, the perfumes of the ladies next to me, the big dresses, you sit there like that because everybody's coming dressed like that. And they sold jewelry at the breakfast buffet in the hotel I was staying. This is also a completely commercialized Gesamtkunstwerk. It's just madness, and you have to experience it to understand the attraction of Wagner to a large, international audience. Same sort of thing happens to Mozart with a different sort of audience, I suppose, and it's a bit less crazy, in my view. But.
All right. Do we have any further questions? Or any thoughts that you would like to share?
thank you so much for your feedback.
Okay.
It's been very, very illuminating and useful. That's what I was hoping would happen. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, one for her. Okay. So yeah, I think this and what we call the Beyond the Concert Hall theme today, because this is really beyond the concert hall, and as far as we can see of what we have been discussing is that what are the benefits of doing this outside and to whom it is for, and importantly, what would happen or would be beneficial after this has been done. So I think this could be the question that's like Dr. Hennamann said, that it could be discussed whether it is through different lens, from which lens we are looking for. There will be someone who benefits from this and of course someone who doesn't. But if we look from the positive side, let's learn from that and we can go on together. I think that's very important. And by that, at 6 o'clock, music make change. We will see how music make change together. So see you at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.